Ladies and gentlemen, we are pleased and honored to have Father Chaplain Michael Creagan as our guest speaker tonight. Chaplain Creagan was born in Japan and he grew up in Hudson, Wisconsin. He was commissioned as a chaplain in the Minnesota Army National Guard in 2013. Ordained a priest for the Archdiocese of St. Paul in Minneapolis in 1997, he served as an associate pastor for St. Michael and St. Mary's Church and St. Croix Catholic School in Stillwater. Then as pastor for Sacred Heart Church and School in Robbinsdale, and currently serves as pastor of St. Joseph's Church and School in West St. Paul since 2008. Chaplain Creagan also served as an adjunct spiritual director for the St. John Vianney College Seminary, University of St. Thomas in St. Paul. His military education includes the Chaplain Basic Officer Leadership course at Fort Jackson, South Carolina. In 2015, he was deployed to Kosovo and served as a brigade chaplain in support of Operation Joint Guardian in the NATO peacekeeping mission there. His awards include the Meritorious Service Medal, the Army Reserve Components Achievement Medal, the National Defense Service Medal, the Armed Forces Expeditionary Medal, plus numerous other decorations, including the Republic of Poland Kosovo Service Medal. Chaplain Creagan graduated from the University of St. Thomas with a major in international studies in 1993. He continued his education at the St. Paul Seminary, University of St. Thomas, where he was awarded a Master of Divinity degree in 1997. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Father Creagan.
I heard that Father Jengdahl usually gets about an hour, so I'll be about an hour 20, so you can get comfortable. Well, again, I'm so grateful to you, Colonel DiPulio. Thanks for the great honor of being able to come and assist with this evening, and a special congratulations to all of you who will be honored for your excellent work. Those of you from St. Thomas Academy, and actually I've met a few from Visitation, will be honored as well, so very hearty congratulations. As the Colonel mentioned, I have kind of a unique job in that I'm both the pastor at St. Joseph's Parish, not very far from here, but I'm also a chaplain with the Minnesota Army National Guard. And I'm currently serving with the 334 Brigade Engineering Battalion. We actually have our headquarters in Stillwater, but we have different units around the state. And I have to tell you, this was not something I sought out. I didn't decide suddenly to become a priest and a chaplain, but rather in the year 2011, I was actually contacted by Chaplain Colonel John Morris, and some of our folks here will probably recognize his name. He served as the head chaplain in the state of Minnesota, and he's a Methodist minister, and currently he's serving at Fort Sill. He's on active duty. Well, Chaplain Morris asked me for lunch one day, and I thought, well, I'll go for lunch. That's a good thing. You know, I'm not going to turn a lunch down. And he said, Father, we really need Catholic priests in the Army. And I said, no, I can't do it. I'm too busy. I've got a busy parish with a school. I can't do that. So that was fine. We left. About a month later, he called again. Can you have lunch? I thought, well, okay, I'll go for lunch again. This time I sat down with him for lunch, and he handed me my last name embroidered on the little name tape that's used for the combat uniform. I thought, nice try. And he said the pitch again, we really need priests. And I said, no, I'm just too busy. About another month passed by, and Chaplain Morris is kind of a persistent man. And he called me for the third lunch. I thought, okay, I'll go. And we were actually at the Cherokee, not too far from my parish. In fact, I can still remember the booth we were sitting in. And I was getting ready to tell him the reasons why I wouldn't be able to do this. And he looked at me and he said, Father, he said, you have something that others don't have. Now remember, Chaplain Morris is a Methodist minister, so I'm thinking in my mind in ecumenical terms. I thought, well, I had a hospital chaplaincy training. I thought, what could he be talking about? And that's when this Protestant minister looks me in the eye and he says, Father, you can forgive sins. I thought, nothing like guilting the Catholic priest, so... It wasn't long after that I actually raised my hand, and actually I was honored. Actually, a couple of the folks who are here tonight, some of our military folks were actually present for that. I trained for about 3.5 months at Fort Jackson in South Carolina, and some of the training is similar to the soldiers. We did the land navigation, you do the thing with the gas, of course the PT in the morning, some of those things. And then, of course, because we have to do those things, because we move with the soldiers as well. When we're assigned as a chaplain, we move around with the battalion, so we kind of have to keep up with them. As you heard in the introduction, I also served recently in Kosovo. I was called up to serve on the NATO peacekeeping mission, along with 30 other nations. In fact, I have a series of 30 pictures. Somebody dared me to try to get a picture with each soldier from every country. I did it. It took a month and a half. But there's literally 30 nations working together on this peacekeeping mission. It's a beautiful example, really, of unity that way. But it was a great opportunity. I was actually assigned specifically to be the English-speaking Catholic priest. So when I arrived, our commander, I was actually serving a North Carolina unit. He was a Baptist gentleman, and he looked at me and said, "Remember, Father, you're not just the chaplain for the Catholics, and you're not just the chaplain for the Americans." He said, "You're the chaplain for everybody here." So it was a great opportunity to get to know so many different people from different cultures and lands. Now, one big question that I get an awful lot, especially from the school kids at St. Joseph's when I visit with them, is they always ask me one question. I'll give you the answer right away. No, I don't carry a weapon. Chaplains don't carry weapons. We're the only unarmed people in the Army. I'm actually assigned an enlisted soldier who has my security, and of course that will vary sometimes in different locations, but I always have a wonderful chaplain assistant who is a great assistant for that. Now sometimes, as we think about this thing, it's a balance, of course, to be both a Catholic priest in a parish and also a chaplain, but it's a possible thing. And I always say that, first of all, I have the best job in both worlds. First of all, it's a great thing to be a priest. Whatever your vocation is, wherever God calls you, say yes to that. Some will be called to married life, some to single life, some to religious life, some to priesthood, all different sorts of vocations. So you will certainly want to ask the Lord where your vocation is. But the other part of my job is a great thing as well. I always tell the soldiers in the Army that I have the best job in the Army because my job is to serve the soldiers. It couldn't be anything better. What does a chaplain do? Well, the chaplain has kind of two basic things. First of all, the chaplain is there to take care of the religious needs of the soldiers. You'd kind of guess that. And part of those duties include what I do in my parish. Obviously, celebrating the sacraments, celebrating Mass, offering counseling, maybe helping people in different educational areas, whatever it might be. I also serve as what's called a staff officer, and I'm also an advisor to our battalion commander. And sometimes I may need to advise them on different operations, on of course, the moral or religious or ethical questions of it. And another example is sometimes if we're involved in a tactical situation, I may have very specific advice on a particular operation, on the impact it might have on a local indigenous religion or population or certain holy days, whatever it might be. Sometimes I'm used as a delegate to reach out to local leaders. And I can tell you in Kosovo, it's a nation that was actually 90% Muslim, and I was asked to assist on a few missions reaching out to the local imams, and it was actually a great honor. I even had the honor of being invited to speak at a Muslim high school, which is called a madrasa, and then I was invited a couple weeks later to speak at an Islamic university right in Pristina. And both times, it was on the topic of religious tolerance. And I actually found the students had great questions, and they just gave a great welcome to me, and they were very happy to interact with the American priest. Now, when I was deployed to Kosovo, though, it was a little bit of a challenge for my parish. And some of you who are St. Joseph parishioners know that you had to work with us a little bit. There were some different priests coming in to help from time to time. My parish has about 1,900 families, and we've got a school that's pre-K through 8th grade. But everyone really pulled together to make it work. In fact, I did a lot of Skype meetings. I hired a new staff member on Skype. That's kind of an interesting experience. I later found out she could only hear half of what I was saying on the thing, but the employment worked out pretty well. On about 10 different occasions, I also had Skype visits with different classes in the school. Because of the time difference, it was pretty good. It was nighttime for us, daytime for our kids. And I wanted to help introduce our kids to some other countries, so I would ask some of our other NATO partners to join me. So on some of the classes, the kids got to meet soldiers from Armenia, Turkey, Poland, Germany, Luxembourg, Austria, just to name a few. So that's just a little bit about my life as a priest and a chaplain, as the colonel had asked me to visit about. But the colonel asked me to also say something about an aspect of leadership tonight, as all of you are being honored, again, at this great opportunity, this great ceremony. And I have to tell you, over the last couple of weeks, I thought, what can I bring about leadership? What can I bring to St. Thomas Academy? What can I bring to each of you as you're being honored this evening? Well, one story really stayed in my mind that was really, I would have to say, one of the most powerful images I have ever seen, not from a military leader, although it includes somebody who's in charge of the world's smallest army. And this lesson that I learned actually came from Pope John Paul II. And now we know him as Saint John Paul II. Way back in 1995, I was a seminarian and I went to Rome for a visit. I'd never been there before. And I'd asked then Archbishop Flynn if he could write a letter asking if I could go into the Holy Father's Mass. What had happened with Pope John Paul II is he would celebrate Mass each day in a very small chapel in his quarters, and there would be about 30 people who could attend. And I was looking at your chapel on the other side of this wall, and it's probably about twice the size of the Pope's chapel. So the private chapel is just, again, half that size. So I thought it would be a long shot, but I thought we'll have the Archbishop write, see what happens. Worst thing they can do is to say no. Maybe about 3 days into my trip, I went back to the place where I was staying, and there was a very simple note without a name, without a return phone number on it, that just said, be at the bronze doors tomorrow at 6:30 in the morning. And I knew exactly what that was. So the next morning, after not sleeping very much, I went to the bronze doors, pretty excited, and I met the other 30 people who were there. And they came from all walks of life. There were people who were young and old, married, single, religious priests from all different countries. There was a newly married couple from Germany, a religious sister from France. I can still remember them very well. And we were led past the Swiss Guard security. They checked us in to make sure we were who we were supposed to be. And then they led this little group of 30 people through some stairs. We went up an elevator, we went down a hallway, and finally we got into the Pope's private chapel, which, again, mind you, is really, really small. Maybe, again, as I said, just about half the size of your chapel. And I'll never forget, as I rounded the corner, and as soon as I got through the door, I saw before me, just 6 feet in front of me, Pope John Paul II in his prie-dieu, a kneeler, deep in prayer. And I thought to myself in that split second, I thought, here is the man with literally all the weight of the world on his shoulders, and he's showing us where he gets his strength, his courage, and his wisdom, right there in that quiet time of prayer. Daily prayer is so important. We might say meeting the Lord is indispensable. Now, some of you may come from different faith backgrounds. I know that many of you here are Catholic. Some may be Protestant. Some may be Jewish. Some may be Muslim. There may be some who are Buddhist or Hindu. And the answer is the same, that daily prayer, meeting the Lord in that quiet, really humbling ourselves before our Maker and allowing the Lord to bestow His strength upon us, that's needed by all of us. And when I talk about prayer, I don't mean just a little quick mealtime prayer. Those things are good. Yeah, that's great. Or just a little, call out to God when we need something. That's important too. But what I'm talking about is what I learned from watching Pope John Paul II that morning, is that sustained daily prayer. He would spend time each and every day in that quiet prayer. And that's a challenging thing for us, because we live in an incredibly noisy world right now. There's so much that's taking our attention. There's always noise that's going on everywhere. If we get a free moment, we pull out the cell phone, whatever's going on. It's really, really hard for us to break away and carve out some of that quiet prayer time. But it's so vital. Now, in just a few moments, many of you will be decorated for various honors. And you've worked very, very hard. And no doubt you have been called to leadership as you have, and you will continue to be called to leadership. Some of you will be called to be leaders in the civilian world. Some of you might be called to be leaders in the military world. In fact, some of you might even be called to the Minnesota Army National Guard. That was actually a recruiting pitch there, by the way, so I'd be happy to talk to you afterwards. But wherever you're called to as leaders, remember again that indispensability of prayer, daily sustained prayer, and it's tough to make time for it. I'll never forget when I was in high school, we were going to pick my grandmother up for Mass. My grandmother was a little short French-Canadian lady, and she could be pretty feisty sometimes. And she lived in her own home, and my second cousin had kind of fallen on hard times. He was up in Alaska, and he and his wife had some difficult times. And anyway, they came down to live with my grandmother to kind of recoup, and sort of kind of get a new start. And I'll never forget, as we were going to pick up my grandmother, my cousin was out in the yard raking the lawn. That's a helpful thing to do. And I'll never forget, my grandma went in the front seat. Again, she's very, very small. The window was down. And my cousin Tom put the rake down, and he bent down to the window, and he said, "Edna, when you get to church, would you say a prayer for me?" in the nicest, sweetest voice. To which my grandmother responded, why don't you go say one for yourself? And she rolled up the window. Was it cruel? Well, maybe. But was it true? Yes. Because our relationship with the Lord is something that we cannot delegate. Just like we cannot delegate an exercise plan or a diet to somebody else, we cannot delegate that relationship nor that time that's needed to build that in that silent prayer. You know, some of the greatest military leaders in the world were people of prayer. It was actually General George Washington who instituted the Chaplain Corps to assist with the spiritual needs of the soldiers during the Revolutionary War. He saw the great value and the great importance of the soldiers having those needs met. So no matter how strong you are physically, no matter how intelligent, none of that matters unless you first have that strength that comes from within that can only be nourished by prayer. So I encourage you, as you're thinking about those different roles of leadership you'll be called to in the future, remember to always nourish it with that time and quiet. I know that you've been called to be great leaders. You've been called to be leaders here at St. Thomas Academy and Summit Visitation as well, and you'll be called to be leaders in the world as well. You're going to do great things, so congratulations to each one of you. We're certainly proud of you and proud of your efforts, and I'm looking forward again to seeing the great presentation of the awards. So God bless you and congratulations.